recording. Um, as per usual, I've been sending out prompts and some questions and ideas that Susan Mendoza and I have been thinking about. If we want to address those, we certainly can. But then also, again, as per usual, if there are things that people would like to discuss instead, that is also fine. A few little ground rules. If you can keep your audio on, that would be great. It keeps conversation a little bit more fluid and people don't go looking around to find where they need to unmute themselves. On that note, if there is bizarreness that goes on behind you, yeah, that's okay. Or if there are random weird sounds that just get projected from different corners, just blame it on someone else in the room. You know, you could just look at any favorite target and say, that must have been Tim O'Neill. Thanks, Tim. You could just sort of toss it anywhere. It's fine. These are kind of chaotic times and we should be very comfortable with that environment. I will probably be sort of asking a lot of questions verbally, but then Susan also is running kind of the chats, and as people sort of text out answers, that is also available. Again, after the session, we'll upload both the chats as well as the video. So maybe first and foremost, how are you guys doing in what really is the new normal? I mean, for a few days, maybe weeks, it was kind of edge of your pants, kind of bizarre, maybe terrifying, maybe strange, maybe completely incomprehensible. Now we're starting to move into a period of maybe a little bit more reflection and maybe a little bit more thought through. How's everyone doing?
I can
Clearly
jump in
my speaker is broken. Yeah.
No. So first, Billy, thank you for offering this. And secondary, thanks for asking. In the midst of all of this crazy, we often forget to ask how everybody's doing. So I'm Donna from Florida Atlantic, a little bit south of Billy. We're doing okay. We hosted our virtual research symposium this past weekend with a few hiccups, but overall the team pulled together a mammoth task in a really short space of time. And I kind of feel very proud that we were able to accomplish this amidst all of the other crazy. It's good to see faces as well. It's good to see lots of happy, productive faces.
Anyone else at this moment?
I'll go. This is Susan from Grand Valley State University. We have our virtual Student Scholars Day on Wednesday. So I spent my morning trying to find audience members. So that's the part I hadn't thought about as deeply as I would like. So I've been furiously sending emails to colleagues and students to have them join the event. But we're hanging in there. We had a lovely announcement from our governor this morning. So we're trying to figure out how to navigate summer and spring when we're not sure how long we'll be at the stay-at-home order. But I've noticed that faculty are adjusting to their classes online and are coming up for a little bit of air, which is fabulous, and are starting to think about summer. So we're having some good conversations, which I appreciate. So we're going completely online with all of our programs this summer. So that'll be an adventure.
Okay, those are perfect. Actually, they're a really nice segue into maybe one of our most important questions. Why should we continue promoting research opportunities, especially as increasingly it's required to be virtually? I know that's not exclusive to everybody. Our campus, as an example, students can still come into campus or into labs in groups of no more than 2 to 3 with a mentor, so that includes the mentor. But many campuses across the university have gone entirely virtual and many labs have stopped. So what are some reasons why we might want to continue to try to promote these opportunities, especially since you're the faculty, administrators, staff that are making these real for our students?
One major motivator for promoting summer opportunities this summer is, I'm just thinking about our upcoming seniors. And, the summer after your junior year, if you're planning on going to graduate school, this is going to be a great summer for them to be able to add to their graduate school packet, the whole nine. And so it's like if they really were counting on this summer as one of those summers to actually beef up their application packet, if they don't have this virtual opportunity or something, it's just and it's not promising. It's just a little bit more risky, if that makes sense. So that's one of our main motivators as well. amongst many.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I don't think I think it's more nuanced than the should we be promoting or not promoting. In many cases, some of the projects, you know, for summer funding for our summer research fellowship program, or, you know, these virtual conferences at the end of the year, these are projects that have been worked on for months or years, and they've been built up to that point. And I think it's only right that we supported them at the initiation, we supported them through, we continue that support through to the end. I don't know that I'd be pushing a lot of underclassmen to start a brand new research project this week, but I think for anyone that's got established relationships on campus, I think continuing to support and promote those things is what we do.
Yeah.
And I'll say too, I had a good conversation with a group of faculty mentors. I'm Kate Hansen, by the way, from Syracuse University. And we also came around to, like, you know, the students that are already sort of engaged with us and had proposed projects and we're really counting on funding this summer. We want to be able to allocate the funding wherever possible, and just shift their projects to something virtual. But one thing we kind of came around to was that I think one of the primary learning outcomes of undergraduate research, as much as the topic, is sort of resilience, right? And learning how to pivot and learning how to, you know, when things don't turn out the way you expect, learning how to reframe your project. And so, like, that's what we have to do right now. You know, I think we're not living the example of what we're trying to teach them if we were to just say, no, you know, it's all canceled. And I know, and one like sort of challenge I think that we'll face in all of this is that, you know, different faculty mentors have different capacity for online mentoring, this, especially over the summer with people's childcare still, you know, very much up in the air. So we, to that end, like, as we're moving towards awarding our summer grants, I'm surveying all the proposed faculty mentors just to say, like, hey, could you work with this student virtually? Or could you work with them at like 50% virtually? So maybe like that they're not doing the whole project full scale, but just scaling back a bit, but still supporting the student.
Yeah. So Lance Barton at Austin College, north of Dallas. And I would say that, you know, the big reason to continue to work with students and to continue to try and find ways to work with students virtually, even those that should be in the lab in the summer, or would normally be in the lab, let's say should normally be in the lab in the summer, is just the far greater impacts that I see, and I wish there was a good way to quantify them, for the students on the impact on the curriculum in the classroom. I mean, right now I'm doing I'm teaching a course that has a CUR-based course, integrated research course for sophomores, and I have a few students who have done summer research after their freshman year in other labs, and they're really leaders among their groups, among their peers in the classroom. It influences how other students ask questions. They're definitely more comfortable asking them questions, but then that empowers them to ask me questions. And so the loss of all of those students, when I think up and down my curriculum, would have dramatic effects on the classroom environment, and I think the learning environment for all the students involved. And so I think finding some way to continue to stimulate students, continue to build skills, continue to build confidence, even in a cohort of students, benefits everybody.
Anyone else?
This is Joanne, High Point University. I don't want to lose the momentum. We work really hard to get our students started or into the pipeline really, really early. And I think we have a program for freshmen. They're not doing research, but they learn about who and how to get started. So they're started by their sophomore year. If I lose them now, they get involved in everything else, and they might not be trying to get back in until their senior year. So even we can't, at our institution, we can't be on campus. The week's faculty can be on campus. Students can't be on campus. There is no students allowed on campus this summer. I'm looking for ways that we can keep students in the game remotely, even, and most challengingly, those that are normally in a lab.
Those are really good observations. And one of the things I kind of heard quite a bit is the virtual component. How are you guys, if you're able to, help your faculty see different types of virtual arrangements? I remember one of the first things that I saw as campuses were starting to shut down. I think this came from the Division of Chemistry and CUR, was a very nice list of suggested opportunities that could be done virtually in a case where the campus was closing. Now, we have the privilege because we get to sort of see what other institutions are doing in ways that maybe sometimes our faculty do not. What are some ways that you guys are helping your faculty see different ways to connect with their students in a virtual environment, especially if you are on a campus that is closed?
I don't know that I have an answer for you, Billy, but I certainly echo the sentiment. I mean, I think one of the challenges that we are really facing is that even if the campus is open, our faculty are still spread out, and our ability to get together and communicate the way we normally would has been hampered and distanced. And I know I've benefited tremendously from participating in some of these discussions, hearing some of the other things, reading some of the things that are out there. And maybe to the detriment of having all my lectures recorded or whatever I need to do for class. But at least I'm thinking about this, and we just tried to engage some colleagues in a conversation on our campus, colleagues in leadership positions, to look at how do we move forward. And I felt like there's just, right now, people are reacting sort of in a very overwhelmed sort of pushback. I don't have time to think about this. I can't be creative. And we don't have the structures in place to find those faculty and engage. And so I think I have faculty who would want to work with students, who can work with students productively, but they don't know how to get started right now. And, some cases the department chair just pushed out an email and just said, tell me whether your projects can go remote this summer. And so I look at one department in particular who responded saying, oh, well, only one faculty in our department could possibly work with students remotely. But I ended up on two phone conversations with two different members of that department on Friday after that faculty member after the chair sent the email. And they were like, oh, I hadn't thought about doing that. Oh, I hadn't thought about, I really could do that. And I got an email on Friday afternoon saying that one of them is now definitely in for summer and has the perfect student and is ready. And it's like, we need to have those conversations, but I don't know what the mechanism is to get it done, because everybody's off. Everybody's on a different asynchronous schedule right now. And so I'm really struggling also, I think, in trying to figure out how to provide that leadership.
Yeah, this is Dan Moriarty from Siena College. I'll piggyback off of what Lance was just saying there, because I see myself going through that as well, because I'm both faculty and administrator for our undergraduate research. And I find myself trying to figure out, what am I going to do? Because there's the project as written, there's just no way that I can do it as written. So can I do this in a different way? And a lot of faculty I'm talking to are struggling with that as well. And I'm trying to get as much information as I can. All the while, we're completely closed down. There's no on-campus work during the summer as well. And to be quite honest, once this semester is done, and I really hate to say this, but I feel like I need a break. Like, after everything that has happened, I kind of needed a chance just to step back and catch my breath for a little bit, and trying to figure out how to do all of this in a virtual way isn't going to give me much of an opportunity to do that. But to a point that Joanne made earlier, you want to keep that momentum going. You work so hard to get things to this point, and you get the younger students involved. You don't want to stop. And we are kind of at this area where it's hard to figure out which direction things are going to go. There's no good, I certainly don't have an answer. I haven't heard, most people seem to be sort of in that same boat as well, just trying to figure this out, because we're living right through it.
Yeah, so let me piggyback on something that Daniel said, because Daniel, like you, I'm a double faculty member and heading up this office, and the feedback that we've been getting from our faculty is that timing is a hell of a thing, and a lot of our faculty are still trying to grapple with their requirements, albeit all of the other things that we would love for them to do. So one of the things that we came up with, which is something that I would love to launch, would be a live WebEx for faculty at my institution, to talk about best practices of working with students in an online setting. But I have resisted up until now, simply because we prioritized the symposium, and we sent out this really nice email to say, hey, the symposium is virtual. You have the whole weekend. If you have a few minutes, go in and provide feedback. to the undergraduate students that have spent so long. So I think timing is something that's so crucial, especially at this point in time when there are so many other priorities going on. And for that reason, we've held back with all of these wants to do things as versus when is the right time to launch them. I would be curious as to what other people were doing.
Happy hour. One thing we started doing, and it
Love.
was only last week, but hosting a faculty happy hour and hosting a student happy hour. We had a mix of two, but after 5 p.m. and people were bringing in their own libations, and therefore we're not the ones trying to get the answers. And Daniel, I couldn't agree with you more. If we're trying to come up with every single solution, oh Lord, that is daunting. But all I had to do was just open up the space. People had their scotch or their beer or their wine or maybe even, water. And they just start flooding out ideas. And you could just see sort of where other faculty were taking those and kind of almost what Lance talked about, using it as a jumping point to sort of think through what other things they could be doing.
Yeah, I would build on that and say we have a lot of confidence in our faculty's creativity here. And they're invested in research continuity. So we've really moved forward at CU Boulder with the summer grant program and left it wide open for revision moving forward. And so, these students are assured of funding. They have funding for the summer. We use stipends. We pay everything in a lump sum at the beginning of the term. And so students have that, they can use it, and then faculty then have that student as a resource because they have a ton of work to do, and those students are invited into that work, whatever it looks like moving forward, and they don't really have to worry about project outcomes. We are deeply invested in learning outcomes anyway, so we're really not that concerned about what the project outcome is. In terms of working virtually, I know there's a lot of anxiety among our faculty about moving into that space. But one of the things I've been trying to sort of bridge between our populations is that many students are more comfortable in this space than they were walking into the lab. So this is not all deficit thinking. There are some significant advantages to this. In many ways, our students are more accessible. They're trapped in a room. They can't be somewhere else. And so, faculty are in similar positions. And so where our students would potentially come back to me saying, I have tried to visit this faculty member 6 times, and they are never there, or they're always on the phone, or the door is always closed, or they don't answer their email. Well, guess what? They're significantly more accessible at this point in time. And this has been a real equalizing experience. And I think that in equalizing, it's not all deficit. We do have the ability to raise up and sort of make each other stronger in all of this. And undergraduates can play a really significant component in that.
So this is Sarah Russell over at Duke, and I just wanted to reiterate that I think what you were saying here is exactly right, is that what we're trying to do is think about this with a kind of more open-endedness, more flexibility than we typically do in a typical year. And we debated whether we would offer our summer research fellowship and a bunch of other programs that had summer research fellowships on campus. We're sort of trying to decide if they could go forward with them. And I think a lot of us found, much to our sort of surprise and relief, is that a number of students' projects and a number of mentors said, yeah, there is a remote component. There's some data analysis here that really can be done in a remote location. And for some of our rising seniors doing chemistry majors, in fact, this is actually an opportunity to kind of stop the lab work they've been doing all year and actually dig down with the data. And so, we know that it's going to look different. We know that our stipends and our timelines for work is going to be slightly different, but we're actually hopeful that what'll come out of this is a slightly different approach to summer research overall, and that if we don't use all of the stipends and all of the money, then that's something that can be put aside maybe for next year, because who knows what the budgets are going to look like next year, right? But anyway, so yeah, so I just wanted to echo Timothy, just what you're saying about just the potential for some flexibility in how we look at this.
So there's a flip side to this. I'm really, I think you guys are dead on. There's a lot of flexibility and there's a lot of different things that people are doing. I did want us to have a little bit of discussion about the conditions to which something has to be stopped, has to be suspended and or delayed, because there's a lot of guilt that people are feeling when they can't actually live up to what they perceive as their professional expectations. And maybe at times that's fair, and a lot of times it's not fair. I mean, we have campuses across the country where everything has been shut down. We have people who are very confused about their situation. In the state of Florida, and Donna would know this, a lot of us have been told to give all of our budget back. So we don't have anything, and it's really trying to see what resources are there. One of the reasons we started this conversation, if I could just give a little bit of context, is over the past 6 years, there have been significant disruptions in what I've been able to support on my campus in terms of undergraduate research. And over the past 2 years, there's been 5 major events that have had very big effects in terms of influencing and really kind of detrimenting what could be accomplished. And that included, of course, Covid-19, red tide, which was enormous down in Southwest Florida, blue-green algae at the exact same time, and then 3 separate hurricanes which stopped research projects, Irma, Maria, and Dorian, partially international, partially local. And what I noticed is I was not very proactive. Every single thing was reactive. There are times where it's out of our control. What are some of the other things that might provide some understanding of why something has to be stopped or suspended or delayed? And how can we help facilitate that so it doesn't become a loss, but maybe in the same way that Tim and Sarah are talking about, we can change it and make it a positive or create more experience, more opportunity for our faculty and our students.
Well, I think I just want to pick up on your point about, the line between sort of being creative and flexible and finding interesting new ways of doing things against the question of feeling compelled to do a lot more with too little and not enough. And the sense that the show must go on no matter what torture is being inflicted. And I do think that's a really delicate balance. So I think, one of the things we've been thinking about, and I feel like we've been messaging pretty well on this, that, that it's great if there's sort of a happy kind of serendipity about what can be done in this remote setting. But I don't think we're communicating to any of our faculty or mentors or students that, there's a gun in the small of your back, you got to pull this off. And so we have a number of programs who said, nope, it's not going to happen. I'm not doing an organic chemistry wet lab remotely. I'm just not gonna. But also just sort of the thinking of people even beyond that obvious limitation is this, there are matters of bandwidth. Your point, Charles, about funding being pulled back. I mean, I think, I'm from a fairly affluent university, but all of us are going into a year where, God knows how our financial situations are going to look in even just, certainly immediately, but 6, 8, 10 months down the road. And so I think the balance here is to sort of say where creativity emerges and where there's room to kind of sustain that, that's really wonderful. But I think we have to give everybody breathing room in this space to also, draw some fences around what's workable.
Mm-hmm.
I'd really be curious to see how we can engage sort of a broader community, at least on my campus. And so, I mean, I say that because I've looked at, we basically have 2 different models on our campus for undergraduate research. We have the lab science model where the faculty have been pretty strong promoting, in the summer students are working 40 plus hours a week and they're here and they need us and we should be here and yada, yada, yada. And then we have a model in humanities and social sciences where like you don't sit and, go through that stuff for 40 hours a week, right? It's a different pace, it's a different model. And
Right.
I think that there's a lot of assumptions that have been made back and forth on both sides.
Right.
You know, largely, unfortunately, negative assumptions as to what the quality is or what can be accomplished, or, you know, you have the funding because you have a lab. And if I had a lab, what could I do with a lab? And I always like to ask that question, what could you do with a lab? What would you do with a lab, right? Let's like back up for a moment and stop. And I really hope that I understand some of the folks who are putting up the fence and going, you know, I just can't do, you know, an organic synthesis. I mean, I can't imagine why we wouldn't want to give students flammable and explosive things and send them home. But, you know, if we're not going to do that, that's fine. But how do I keep them engaged so that we can maybe start to break down some of these stereotypes and misinformed stereotypes about what is and is not research, these sort of old conversations, you know, what are different models? You know, not everything has to look exactly the same way. I mean, we've had some problems even in like lab science situations where we get a faculty member whose model maybe doesn't quite fit and they don't understand. And it doesn't, and they get a lot of pushback from their colleagues, or in the, you know, somebody in the social sciences who has more of a lab-based model and that just the funding's not there. And, you know, maybe use this way to try and make sure that everybody stays engaged so we can start to really have some honest and open conversations about what these other models look like and how that flexibility should be built into the system moving forward.
Sure. So I just wanted to tap in from the chemistry sides of things because that happens to be my own department. And I wanted to share a story. So we have our organic chemistry lab faculty have flipped our model to make it work, which makes us think about what is the outcome that we expect. In the past, the chemistry department and our department has primarily focused on instrument expertise. And because of what's happening in the environment of COVID, they've switched, and we've switched our thinking into an analysis expertise. So we have these two awesome faculty members that are going in and videotaping themselves doing the experiments so that they can provide the data for the students to do the analysis. How does that apply to undergraduate research, right? So in the labs and in the sciences, a lot of what we've placed a priority on has been skills gained in tangible NMR and all of these sort of instruments that we think is important for our students to learn. But from industry, what we know is that when they get into the industry world, their instruments are far advanced than the academic instruments that we own and have, and they have to be retrained on the instrumentation. Having said that, if they do analysis well, they transition that experience very differently. So I wonder, within that conversation, Lance, that you brought up, thinking about, and I think Tim brought it up earlier, how much we prioritize student learning. What if we redefine some of those skills to be the skills that we know, independent of mode, that's what we can get within the context of research? Just a side thought.
Yeah, I would underscore that with, you know, the thing we're often trying to communicate to students is that they're acquiring transferable skills, regardless of what they're doing. And the number one job skill employers are looking for has now just been prioritized: written communication. Yeah. So this is an opportunity to build the number one most in-demand job skill, regardless of field.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll just say, as yet another chemist, we're kind of running into a very similar thing, is that we, you know, trying to figure out what can we do, and like all of my experiments are heavily lab-based, and just trying to figure out how I can make that work personally, but also us as a department. And it's certainly, as we all know, and have all been running into, it really is forcing a re-examination. When I start to think about the number of faculty that their summer research is lab-based, it's, you know, it's probably 75 to 80% of what I've funded over the last 2 years. But I'm going to be sending out a survey later on today, as soon as I get the official okay from the administrator above me, that the language that I'm using is he's comfortable with. It's basically making, you know, seeing who can shift over to be something that they didn't have it set up as remote, but they could do it potentially as remote, as a way for me to show to the administration that it's worth keeping these funds that we had set aside for this to still be used for that. And I don't know if I'm going to be successful. You know, I think Sarah had brought up the whole point of we don't know where things are going to be going. Charles, you said that, they're saying don't spend anything. I haven't been told that yet, but I have a sneaking suspicion I may hear that sooner rather than later. But I at least want to be able to present something to the administration to say, hey, this is a viable way for us to do something, and something that we can hopefully set up for the students and faculty. I do wonder if they're going to ask me to maybe cut back, at least on the faculty stipends, if not the student stipends. And cutting back on the student stipends would effectively kill it. As it is, they're not getting paid much to begin with. I do wonder, though, if they're going to ask maybe to cut back on the faculty stipends since it's being remote. I don't know. I guess I'll cross that bridge when it comes to it.
I think it's a very good observation, Daniel. On our campus, I've been arguing and trying to get some funds back, mainly for the students, which really don't have opportunities come this May. And one of the things I did in this survey that we reached out to our campus is I asked the faculty explicitly, I have very limited funds. Our students are not going to get jobs. Are you okay with foregoing stipends? And there's a few that are not, but the vast majority of them expressed that they were able to, which allowed me to go back to the provost and the president and say that the faculty are supporting this and they want to see this happening. And they are also willing to give up on their personal stipend in order to make sure that we can have students. I still haven't won yet, but it's a good observation and it's worth trying.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I find most valuable about students getting involved in research is the community they create with each other. So they obviously get incredible interactions with faculty, maybe graduate students, depending on the institution, but they get an incredible experience in terms of who their peers end up being and how that translates throughout everything that they do, both socially and academically, during their time. Have people started to think of ways, mechanisms, approaches to facilitate that? Because again, a lot of these conversations that are emerging, when they do, they tend to be more the faculty, the student base, or maybe the faculty, one or two student bases. Have anyone given thoughts to ways to get our students connected to each other during this time frame?
One thing that I was thinking was that we would definitely need to have peer-to-peer support for virtual mentoring over the summer, just to lessen that, that burden on the one-to-one student-faculty relationship. So I have student employees called student research mentors, and they serve as peer mentors during the year. But I thought, well, I could hire some budget available, or even, over the summer to each have a group of 5 to 8 students that they're responsible for sort of creating community with. So maybe I would say they would need to check in with them twice a week, depending on the sort of cycle of work, and that they would do group Zoom chats and just troubleshoot, talk, get to know one another. And those sessions would be without anyone from the office or a mentor. It would just be the students together. So that's one thing I was thinking about putting in place.
Similar to go ahead, Brandy.
I was just going to mention that one thing that I'm working on currently this week, after we met last Friday with some of the faculty members and trying to have this exact same conversation, is that we're going to try to collaborate with all of our programs across campus and see which components of each program we can share and provide our students kind of like a central hub per se of virtual offerings. And say we have one chemistry professor who is good with some of our instrumentation. He wants to do like a little virtual module on that. We have one faculty member from biology department that's going to help our students with their NSF fellowship grant writing. Like all of these calendars or offerings that are similar in each program, we want to combine this. And so then we will be better able to identify our population of students that we're trying to serve, as well as the ongoing efforts through Instagram, our Instagram research page, and our group meets that we have with our students in our various training programs. But since all of us are battling the same things in terms of across campus, but with different programs, identifying those similarities and just coming together, that's what we're trying to do.
We did something like that last year in person. We're fortunate where we're centralized. So all of our programs, whether McNair or the internal programs, the RAUs, we would all connect together for shared professional development, but we're taking those online. So we're going to see how that works. We're having conversations on what are the essential learning outcomes. And I'm thinking professional outcomes, right? So writing is a great example. Figuring out how to do Zoom pieces is another good example, but we're trying to figure out what that looks like. One of the pieces that was very helpful this year that we're going to take online, well, helpful last year that we're going to take online this year is disciplinary discussions. So sometimes it's really challenging to get students all in one space. We used to do it over lunches, but we're going to try to pull students together in aggregate disciplines to have conversations about what's working, what's not working, hopefully get some good feedback on the research that they're doing, and pull in folks like our library faculty or pull in folks from academic computing so we can offer some additional support that we didn't have before. The other piece that was unexpected, at least for me this morning, is that a faculty member from computer and information systems shoot me a note and say, you know, we do this all the time. Do you want help? And I was like, yes, please. So to have him say, you know, we have